Hello, Story Seekers. I'm Ben.
I'm Nico, and you're listening to The Tiny Bookcase.
Our guest for this episode hails from the northwest of England and is a neurodivergent writer of the epic and the urban, the fantastical, the cosy, and the mysterious.
His works include the character-driven dark fantasy series Empire of Ruin and the urban noir fantasy...
We have lost David.
That's worse than the bots.
That's straight away. That's funny. Hello, David.
We offend you.
You're still muted, by the way.
Sorry about that. My Discord just decided to kick me out for
That's absolutely fine.
Just because this is the perfect time to kick you out when you start doing the introduction. So.
It's better to do it now than when you're in the middle of your story or in the middle of a good point in the conversation. That's absolutely fine.
Sorry about that.
Seriously, not an issue at all. Unfortunately, you're just going to have to listen to us do that again because I feel like we're going to struggle to recover from that. One sec. Okay, here we go. Hello, Story Seekers. I'm Ben.
I'm Nico, and you're listening to The Tiny Bookcase.
Our guest for this episode hails from the northwest of England and is a neurodivergent writer of the epic and the urban, the fantastical, the cosy, and the mysterious.
His works include the character-driven dark fantasy series Empire of Ruin and the urban noir fantasy Hell in Haven. We'd like to warmly welcome David Green.
Hello, David.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Don't thank us yet.
Yeah.
So
thank you rescinded for now.
I have to ask this one for personal reasons. Now, are you solely responsible for your son's obsession with Godzilla, or did you have any helpers into entering this young man in the kaiju fandom?
It was a strange one. He kind of came at it. I mean, I've liked kaiju and particularly Godzilla and King Kong for a very long time because I am in my 40s now, so yeah, a very long time. But I went with this kind of thing of like not trying to influence him with my influences to kind of see what he would like himself. But he just got into it, and it was very, very intense for a very, very long time, to the point that we went to watch Godzilla -1 in the cinema, like in Japanese, and he had a great time. So yeah, he loves it.
That's really cool. I was given an extremely heavy recommendation from Nico to watch -1, and I fucking loved it.
I don't know if that was after the first or second time that I watched it in the cinema, but
it was probably the second time, I think. But that's a hell of a movie. I accidentally started watching the dubbed version first. To which I received a digital slap from Nico.
Yeah, it's great. It's a brilliant film, and I mean, obviously the subtitled one is great. But I mean, my son was 6 at the time, so his reading was only kind of coming together a little bit. But he could read Godzilla and he could read kaiju. But the bit, there's a bit in the middle of the film where they start getting reports in from other countries, and you hear reports from America, and he turned to me in the cinema and was like, "Daddy, I can understand Japanese."
Oh wow!
I was like trying not to laugh, because it's like.
Yes, my child. My bloodline is truly gifted.
Yeah, but no, brilliant film. Yeah, we've watched a few of them. We've started going through the whole kind of 70 years worth of Godzilla films.
Yeah.
I'm possibly showing my lack of knowledge in this area here, but are there like mangas and stuff of Godzilla, or is it just movies in Toho?
Mangas, comics. I'd recommend Godzilla in Hell if you're looking for a comic. That's
nice.
Really
Nice.
Yes.
Any tie-in novels yet, or is this a market burgeoning for prospective?
It could be. I'm a big fan of Supernatural, the TV show as well. And at Fantastical, I bumped into the person who works for the company that owns the rights for the tie-ins for Supernatural, and I was like, I would love to write some supernatural books, and he was like, "Well, we're not really doing them at the minute." I was like, "I know, but as soon as you start doing them again, just tell me and I will write them." I was like, "I have the fan fiction ready to go."
That is mad hustle. I love it. Great hustle. Great hustle. Well, speaking of stories and writing stories, we have all written some stories for today. We've written to the same shared prompt, which is going to be false. And Nico, you have the dubious honor of going first. Lie to me.
False. So sunk he was. 24 cannons headed for the locker, and with 'em enough powder to blow the skirts off the East India Company. Captain Oliver the Ruddy seized up his tankard and placed it to his lip. He made a show of draining the last drops, smacked his lips appreciatively, then placed the cup within grasping reach of his rapt audience. He allowed the silence to fester, filling the aged oak beams until they dripped with anticipation alongside their normal salt water. He waited until those present could take no more. But what became of the crew? The man who asked was broad as a barrel and near as full of rum as one. A mischievous glint took Oliver's one good eye. He leant forward conspiratorially. Well now, that's a fine question. My head broke brine, and I gasped at air as a newborn babe would. Truly, it tasted sweeter than the first coney of landfall. Appreciative nods from all the other salty denizens. I felt as though my very beard and cloak meant to drag me with my darling ship. What hope had I here adrift? No food nor water. My glorious ship, the Emerald Cockatiel, drowned. I cast my gaze about to find me crew, but not one did I see. No legs kicking against the tide, not a single gasping face. Where then, I thought, was the foe that brought us down so? To have me ship pull beneath the waves, she'd have to be a mighty galleon. The mug found itself near him again, filled. The power of a good tale. He quenched his thirst. Errant foam clung to his moustaches, and his tongue sought it out. Nothing! No sails decorated the skyline as far as the horizon in all directions. How could it be? I thought. Perhaps it's devils, then. Damned sailors, what about to sink the vessels of hard-working privateers? But no. I had looked all ways, you see, except down. He filled his voice with as much gravitas as he could muster. His hope to summon up the depths in the mind's eye of every man present. Many of them did, then, see only the blackness that lurked beneath the turquoise of the open sea. And did you? Asked one sailor, unable to be patient. That I did, lad. That I did. I gazed down to see if any sign of rigging be left. If some flotsam from my vessel ought to be gathered to allow myself a portion of floating haven. But it was not my ship I saw. There, beneath the waves, was something. Like an eel it was. Its body swam without flipper, nor fin. I couldn't tell at first how grand the beast might be, till I noticed, clutched in its hideous maw, my sweet ship, the Emerald Cockatiel. There were gasps. There were no's. One voice, cold and quiet in the room, said, "Lying bastard." Oliver looked up from his crowd to find the owner of the voice stood at the back of the room. He wore a look of disdain, which matched his ragged hat, torn jacket, and peg leg. Oliver pressed on in the hope the room had not heard what he had. I called down at the monster. You blackguard, I said, You heaving great serpent of the sea! My livelihood you've took, and me crew with it. Noble men, good, honest pirates. The room grumbled their agreement. Drenched and drowned by you, revenge I shall have on thee, O slithering stink, you wretched worm. At that I drew me sword, and thought to swim down on him, when up he came, at dreadful speed. At first I thought to move, for fear had wobbled me belly. I'm only human, after all, lads. The men agreed, save one. He had a space yet in his oily guts, one shaped for a captain, for the morsel he had missed. I held me nerve, and as the shadow came beneath me, I held me blade like so. He drew his sword then, and pointed it tip down, grasping at the hilt firmly with both hands. It wobbled slightly in his drunken grasp, but the effect was nearly there. As he rushed towards the surface, the shadow grew and grew. I felt as though the whole sea had come to swallow me. But I held me ground, me wave. One snort of derisive laughter nearly stopped Oliver, but he muscled on. I felt him first on the bottom of me boots, and I pushed down hard as ever a man has. I felt the blade tip meat flesh, and gave it all I had. I dared not open my eyes as I felt the wind rush past me. For what seemed an age I rose, and finally I had to look. My eye I opened, and I saw the sea below me. Far, far below. I were stood upon its nose, my blade sunk half a length. It bellowed fierce, and I felt me belly quake with the sound. I nearly propped with pressure, so I did. The room had to a man leant forward then. Well, to all but one man. So what was it? An ancient monster from the depths, lad. Hungry for sailors. Green it was, and covered head to tail in scales as big as this table. I was lucky I had found a gap between them for my blade. Oliver took up his mug again and drained it. I had to act fast, I knew. I spied his bulging eyes on the side of his head, and made my plan at once. Having lost an eye and with it a fight, the only fight I ever have, mind you, I pulled free the blade, and I leapt off his mighty snout. As I passed by his head, I thought of home, of me lost lads, and of the pirate code. A cheer went up, and the mug left the table again, to Oliver's delight. I stuck it home true through the jellied bag of the foe, and burst it did, and covered me in rotten foam. How the thing screamed! I could only scream in return, as I released me sword and fell toward the waves. Oliver the Ruddy, I called, has done for you. By the time I surfaced once again, the beast was gone. The room burst to applause, and Oliver offered them a small bow. Then how come you to still have a sword? The questioning man had piped up. What? You let go of your sword in its eye. Well, I bought another one. Is that so? The questioning man lurched forward, his peg legs scraping and bumping as he came. How then did you return to land? I swam. Oliver gulped. Swam? By your tale, you were leagues out. I am a strong swimmer. The room had a hush fallen on it now. They'd all stopped for the exchange. Strong? You'd have to be a galleon with feet for a journey such as that. But then perhaps I am one. The peg-legged man had moved close now, extremely close. And what did you call your ship? The Emerald Cockatiel. I thought so. The peg-legged man put his face so close that Oliver could feel nothing but the booze on his breath. His beard hairs withered in the fumes, and Oliver sensed a familiar itch as a coward's sweat began to gather on him. The same Emerald Cockatiel that was filled with honest sailors seeking work and handed to slavers, would that be? The same Emerald Cockatiel from which I heard a man with a voice quite like yours agree a price for my head. The same Emerald Cockatiel where I was clad in irons and left to have my bows fall loose upon myself, until the ship and all its contents were sold for a song to the first threat that arrived, to save its so-called captain, that same Emerald Cockatiel. Oliver swallowed again. Could be. It was, answered the peg-legged man. His black powder pistol had been drawn, but Oliver's view was obfuscated, and he had seen not a glint of it. Goodbye, Oliver. You sea snake, were the last words he heard before the lead ball finished his story.
Oh, that was atmospheric, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Atmospheric. Whoa, crikey. David, what did you reckon?
Yeah, I loved it. I have to say, first-rate classic pirate accent. It was very, very good.
That's
But yeah, I love the
imitation.
story. No, I loved the story. I thought it was excellent. I was riveted.
For clarity, my story or his?
Yeah, the whole nested storytelling concept for a short story works really well, I think, because it allows you to cut into a scene and a story at the same time. I think.
Yeah.
I liked that a lot. I like it whenever it gets used. It's a good device. Oliver the Ruddy. Now that immediately conjured Oliver Reed in Treasure Island for me. Was that a sort of deliberate choice, or?
So the Oliver for Oliver Reed was, but I didn't think about Treasure Island. I think my brain finished that joke for me.
Yeah, he's Billy Bones in Treasure Island. So
Yeah.
he's like this kind of like this drunk in a tavern, telling old stories and being a bit menacing. So that really worked for me a lot. And then you had this revenant with a peg leg, which would have been silver. It
Shit,
had.
did I accidentally just?
In no way am I like you ripped off Robert Louis Stevenson. I'm saying I think you homaged Treasure Island really nicely in the brief amount of words that you had, with those kind of same sort of like similar sort of character archetypes interacting with each other. At least that was my read, and I really liked that because I like Treasure Island.
Well, as we're taught to do, that was entirely my intention.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you picked up on it.
It's good. It also gave me a really strong. I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show Black Sails. But it gave me a really strong Black Sails vibe. Just that kind of intrigue and the lying to each other over storytelling thing. That's a real guilty pleasure of mine. Black Sails. That's.
Oh, revel in the guilt. It's got the best intro song of any TV show of all time as well.
Hurdy-gurdy up the ass is how I describe that one. It's got some generally wicked music. There's a wonderful version of A Parson's Tale, or A Parson's Farewell, I think it's called, that like builds to like a rock crescendo. Yeah, it's really good. You've almost certainly heard it before, Nico, because I play it too often to be considered sane.
It's one of those songs that to me is just roleplay music.
Yes, very much so. Yeah,
lovely,
for sure.
Lovely stuff.
I like the idea of dealing with a hostile audience in a story as well. It became a story about storytelling, didn't it?
I think so. Do you know what? As I was writing it, I realised that I was drawing a lot of inspiration from Beowulf.
Yes, I was just about to mention Beowulf.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Excellent. Same page. liked it. Um, the familiar itch of a coward's sweat was a great line. I liked that a lot.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that does a lot to do the character reveal. I thought I was looking for the way to show that actually, yeah, he is a complete blackguard.
yeah, I think that worked. I think that worked. There were a couple of bits that I thought maybe potentially weren't necessary. There was the
Yeah,
held my ground. I mean, sea or wave that he said.
yeah,
I felt like he is still a sailor, isn't he? So I'm not like had he turned out to be not to be lying about being a sailor, that might have worked. But I thought
okay,
maybe
yeah,
yeah. I could be wrong. That's just my take on that one. And then in their exchange at the end, sorry, the um, the peg leg character that shoots him says it was when
yeah,
we already as the audience we already know, everybody in the scene already knows, and we already know that this guy has completely skewered him. Like he knows that this is the guy that sold him out. So I think the is was is a bit redundant, and it could
okay,
just the next bit of that conversation could be just him pulling the pistol, which is answer enough, I think. Um, but I really liked it. I like a bit of swashbuckle, and that had it in spades, and was a bit of a meditation on piratical storytelling as well. I think it was good.
Yeah.
I'm thoroughly glad you enjoyed it.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's good note there. I think you're completely right about the exchange at the end.
Yeah, it was just one too many back and forths. I think when the guy had clearly already made his decision to go over there and shoot him, um, which is a good ending, you know. So I
Yeah,
think the idea is to not conceal that. Um, Obfusticate felt like it was potentially a $20 word where a $1 word would do as well there.
I think I
Um,
just like the word.
it's a great fucking word. Don't I mean
You're
like
right.
you could I'm sure you could pull apart any story I've written for the bookcase in exactly the same manner because sometimes you just get really attached to a word and no other word will do, even though your audience might scratch their head a little bit. Um, yeah, really good fun. Really good fun. Thank you.
Well, thank you both for listening. I think, young man, young David Green, it is now your turn, and I get to be the listening man.
Okay, well, this story is called The Bard's Tale. Rumour said Reddick Trent, famed bard of far reach, enjoyed a rather casual relationship with the truth. Tamwin studied him, lemon balm and ginger tea cradled in her hands. The spicy scent swam around her head as the steam rose out of her courtyard garden and high into the Lanriel air, where clear blue skies and a sweltering sun awaited. Reddick gingerly held a mug of his own in one hand, as if he didn't quite trust the container or its contents, and stared around at the still flowers and shrubs. Handsome, if men was a preferred flavour, Reddick appeared exactly how a bard should. A wide hat, complete with a slightly singed phoenix feather, covered a head of golden brown hair, his curls falling to a rest on his wide and athletically muscular shoulders. Midnight black eyes shone beneath the wide brim, and a perfectly sculpted beard covered his jaw and chin. Reddick wore a resplendent red tunic of padded quilt, tight black trousers, also padded for protection against the continent's many horrors, and a pair of shining brown boots running up to just below his knees. A flowing cloak of emerald completed the required costume. And there was the loot, of course. Reddick strolled into Tanwin's good health 10 minutes earlier, strumming a jaunty tune as a group of admirers followed. The instrument now lay in his lap, the hand not holding the cup of tea resting on the strings. Tanwin waited as Reddick continued to peer around her garden. His dark eyes never settled on one item for long, and, now she looked a little closer, a small truth revealed itself. The bard might have worn an easy smile and carried himself with the confidence of a performer, but the telltale signs of an adventurer etched themselves into his visage. An angry, jagged crimson scar climbed from beneath his tunic and up the side of his neck, where his hide tried in vain to hide it. And his eyes. Curious they were, But deep within lay the horrors of the continent. Horrors haunting those forced to join the Adventurers Guild, the second-borns of Lanriel, that left a permanent mark. Tanwyn's stare carried the same weight. She was a second-born too, one of the few who disobeyed the Adventurers Guild's laws and had turned her back on the campaigns after the disaster. It was why she devoted her life to healing, and not just of the body. So you're this mind mage I keep hearing about. Reddick waved his cup Tanwyn's way. His cultured voice filled the garden. Can't say I've heard of a mind mage before, beside the old legends of those who could speak with animals and the like. Are you one of them? Tanwyn offered the bard a gentle smile. No, and I don't claim to be a mind mage. It's simply what others call me. In fact, I believe I'm the continent's only mind mage. So you do heal minds? Reddick leaned forward slightly. That's no falsehood. She inclined her head. I help people heal their minds, yes. With magic? Magic. Tanwyn hadn't been practicing her mind magery for long. Inwardly, she sighed at her own usage of the term. But if she had a Gadaris for every time a new client asked if she used magic, she could buy herself a place on the Guild of Merchants' ruling council. No magic, Tanwyn replied gently. With words and understanding, with truth. Truth? Reddick rolled the word around his mouth like tasting it for the first time. Well, all bards deal in truth. Tanwyn raised an eyebrow. Is that right? A flicker of a smile tugged at the bard's lips, and he narrowed his beleaguered eyes. Have you heard of me? Something tells me you might have. Yes. Tanwyn took a sip of her tea. A niggle of pain worried her hip, an old pain, one she'd carried for 10 years since her first and only campaign, one she could never heal. It always bloomed when she thought about her past, when she became stuck there. I was an adventurer once. Truly? Reddick's fingers plucked the strings of his lute. And you left a guild? A feat seldom achieved, one worthy of song, I should think. Their eyes met for a moment, but Tanwyn blinked and looked away. She could never hold the gaze of an adventurer for long. It reflected too much of her own truth back on her. The gnaw in her hip flared. We're not here to talk about me, she murmured through a wince, and took another sip of her tea, breathing in as the warm, slightly spicy liquid rolled into her stomach. We're here to talk about you. Oh, Reddick blew out his cheeks. His fingers cradled his lute again, and he still hadn't taken a sip of his tea. Soon it would grow cold, and that wouldn't do. That's a shame. Really? Tanwyn tilted her head to the side. Why is that? Well, on my travels, dear healer, I heard tell of your legend, and I simply had to discover it for myself. He grinned at her. I am always in need of new material for my songs, and what better than the continent's first mind mage? Is it true you're helping Fang Ripper? Rumour said Reddick Trent, famed bard of Far Reach, enjoyed a rather casual relationship with the truth. It appeared rumour had it right. But Tanwyn couldn't accuse the man of lying. He clearly needed her help with something, and the relationship of healer and client required trust on both sides, even if the bard wouldn't tell the truth. Tanwyn smiled. This wasn't her first uncooperative adventurer in aid of her methods. Some needed coaxing, others gentle leading, and some she had to best. They were adventurers after all. The name, Reddick of Far Reach, that's what some call you, Tanwyn mused. Strange. The bard frowned. What is? The name, Tanwyn shrugged. I mean, you were born in Lanriel, and... How did you know that? Reddick spluttered. I've never told anyone such a thing, not ever, and... Blasted fates. You didn't know, did you? Tanwyn rested her cup on its saucer. The nagging ache in her hip bothered her, even though she'd exercised that morning and taken a good amount of feverfew. She relaxed her back and stomach muscles, sinking into her chair a little. Tamlin admired those who came to her for help. Apart from her report to the guild, a written one 10 years prior, she'd never spoken to anyone of her experience as an adventurer. I didn't. It's clear you are an adventurer as well as a bard, but you could have signed up to the guild of your own accord. But I thought not. You're a second-born of Lanriel, aren't you? Reddick nodded glumly. What's in this tea? The bard asked. Something to help me? It's just tea. Something nice for us to drink while we talk. The ache prodding at her hip faded as Tanwin forged ahead with her new client. The truth, hard as it was, could heal better than any potion. And I'm not sure how I'm meant to help you. Reddick, you haven't been honest with me since you walked through my door. A muscle twitched beneath the bard's eye. Shaking his head, then nodding, hand grasping the neck of his lute, he lifted the cup to his lips and sipped. His eyes grew wide, and he took another drink and smacked his lips. Not bad. Lemon balm and ginger, you say? I did. Tamlin raised her own cup and took a sip. Now, what would you like to talk about? How can I help you? Reddick frowned and peered down at his lute. Silence smothered Tamlin's garden. Not even the bubbling cacophony of the great city of Lanriel climbed her walls. She leaned forward. Reddick, I can't help you if you don't tell me the truth, and you'll never help yourself if you're not honest. Take it from me. Please let me help you, and please start helping yourself. The bard peered up at her, a flicker of hope bright in his dark, haunted eyes. Nodding, he drained his tea and set it down on the ground along with his lute. Nightmares, he whispered, hands fidgeting in his lap. Nightmares of old campaigns. I thought to buy some sleeping potions, but then I heard of you and... Tamwin settled into her chair and listened as Reddick talked, letting the man spill his reluctant verity. As he did, the niggle in her hip faded to a dull, almost forgotten memory. One day, she'd face her own truths and come to terms with them. Perhaps then she would be free of her past, of her pain. But for now, Tamwin would help those in need. And she would listen to their truth. After all, she was the continent's only Mind Mage.
Dude, I liked that a lot. I really enjoyed the binary, like that each of them thought it was a different kind of binary. So for example, the bard thought it was bard and muse, like he was approaching it as bard and muse, and the mind mage was coming at it from like a psychiatrist and client perspective
I was
from
going
the
to say
start.
the whole like fantasy world psychiatrist angle.
Yeah,
I could go for a lot of that.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's promising because this is so I'm working my work in progress at the minute, which I've nearly finished, is this character, the Mind Mage. It's a fantasy world's first therapist for adventurers. So this is a short story that is inspired by that, basically, that I wrote just for you guys. But
Hell yeah.
it's based in that world. So
Swords, sandals, and sopranos. Yeah, no, not to just be trite. That was really good. I liked that a lot. A couple of game references I think that I caught. I know you called it the Bard's Tale at the start, which my head supplied the tagline "A Quest for Coin and Cleavage" from the RPG from the early 2000s.
Yes.
And you also had the I was an adventurer once, so you had a bit
Yes.
of Skyrim going there as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Loved it. Yeah, I liked. You really like dwelt on the character descriptions at the start, and I think that's quite a bold thing to do in so few words. What was the total word count of that in the end?
It was 7 short of the limit, so it was 1493.
Right. Okay.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. You went to the
Okay.
wire, which is really well done because you got a story told in there. And I thought when you got about halfway through, and I thought this is a lot of character description for this amount of words. But then everything was relevant. Everything tied back in, and it
Yeah.
and it did work as a story. I'm very impressed by that. I liked it a lot.
I think
Thanks very much.
now knowing it's part of a work in progress, this world, you've done a very clever thing here because I want to know so much. You made allusions to a lot of little things. I'm like, oh, I wonder what that is. I wonder how that works. What does that mean? And now, me and everyone listening have to buy your next release because it's this,
Mhm.
and we get the answers to all these bloody questions. This is evil mastermind stuff. This.
One of my favourite brain tickles from that one was this idea that the second borns go to an adventurers guild
Yes, yes.
rather than like in like a medieval-esque setting, like a European medieval-esque setting where the second born would go into the church.
Mhm.
That being like,
Yeah.
this is where their church is because they've got huge problems because of the horrors in the continent. You've got to just put your second born in the adventurers guild to go and try and deal with it. I thought that's what I got from it. Of course, that may not be what the overall story is, but that was my read on that very well introduced bit of world building.
That's great because that is very much like a caste society,
Yeah,
where the firstborns they inherit the family business,
yeah,
and then the secondborns have to become adventurers. And then and it was kind of inspired by that a little bit. I'm obviously I live in Ireland. My family's my mum is Irish, and there is not so much these days, but the further west in Ireland that you go, and more rural, there's specific roles that the children would play in a family, which is kind of inspired by that. But yeah, I think it's just a psychiatrist for D&D characters is just I think is quite a rich. It's a lot of potential for storytelling.
I mean, based on all the groups I've ever been in, they wouldn't stop making sexual innuendos about everything we came across in the dungeon.
I thought you were going to say, based on every group I've ever been in, they fucking need one.
That too.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, the lemon balm and ginger tea in this courtyard garden. For a start, I love courtyard gardens, so you transported me to that place very quickly. But also, you often, maybe if you read Game of Thrones or whatever it is, but you find yourself being like, oh, I bet that tastes delicious, or oh, I bet that tastes gross. You get very engaged in the food of a setting. I don't think I've ever been so um, like keen on a tea in a fantasy setting before, apart from possibly in Robin Hobb's work. If you've read any of her
I love Robin Hobb.
Assassins series,
Yeah, love Robin
yeah,
Hobb. Yeah,
that this kind of character who's like this wounded woman who drinks tea in a courtyard garden and talks to people very thoroughly and cleverly. It gave me a Robin Hobb vibe, which is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the highest compliments I can pay somebody. So nice work.
Thanks so much. Yeah. I love Robin Hobb. So that's wonderful. Thanks so much.
You really, I feel like you really drilled down into that when you were talking about how, she'd done her exercises, and this implication of like how damaged the body is, but she's just in this moment of calm, just going to do this job because this is what she's doing now.
I think that was a
Yeah,
particularly nice way to refer to someone with chronic pain as well, because it was something
yeah,
that it would pull her out of her thoughts, which is a very real thing for chronic pain, and then being upset because she's done whatever your doctor's told you to do that's meant to make it not hurt, and that did make that representation of having a chronic pain very real and very accurate for me. Like that a lot.
Thank you.
The it's just tea vibe was lovely. Yeah, because it could have been, oh, the tea's poisoned.
Full of truth serum.
Yeah, this kind of thing. But it wasn't. It was just tea, and they were just chatting, and it was still riveting. So nice work. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Well, Benjamin, that leaves one person to tell a story this day. We've had pirates, pots of tea. What have you got for us?
Zero fear. False. From a distance, the men arrayed in their regiments looked like tiny skittles through which the cannonballs bounced playfully. The red of their coats and the twinkling brass of their buttons gave an impression of glory, which belied the horror those men were undergoing. No wonder the general is so callous, thought Henry. He hasn't ever seen them as real people. Each new ball spat from the defenders on the city walls was followed by an accompanying gout of jaundiced smoke. He knew that behind the embrasures, men frantically primed, loaded, and fired in a cycle which would not end until they ran out of black powder. Henry observed the general watching impassively as his own battery of cannons tore pitiful chunks from the angled walls of the city. His army, pointlessly fielded within the enemy cannon range without trenches or cover, seemed as though it were an extension of the man's puffed-up ego. "We'll be at this till Judgment Day as it is," muttered one of the fops masquerading as a colonel. Henry suspected the man was more worried he might miss the start of the social season back home than the cost a lengthy siege would levy on his countrymen. "It's the walls, Tarquin. They're designed to encourage glancing blows." The general spoke with authority, but did not order a change in the angle of his guns. "Where is my master carpenter?" Henry cleared his throat. "Here, sir." "I understand you've a report for me?" The general did not glance away from the slaughter as he spoke. "It's the wood we've been supplied with, sir. It's green, unaged, and like to rot. I submitted a formal complaint to the quartermaster, but he says his hands are tied, and to carve it up anyway. Which we did, sir, but... Get to the point." "Well, it's the soldiers, sir. They won't have much quality of life after the battle's done." There was a pause as the general finally turned to look at Henry. His eyes were the grey of an uncaring sea, and his freshly shaven face was creased with sabre scars and wrinkling folds. Henry felt as though the sum of his parts was being measured with cold precision. "Your job isn't to give them back their lives, Master Carpenter. It is to give me more soldiers. I want them back up on their feet by the time we crack the walls. Your marionettes will be given the honour of forcing the breach." The general, his order given, looked back to the siege. Henry knew he would torture himself for years if he didn't say something to try and help those soldiers. "For the moment then, sir, shouldn't our men be moved out of range?" "Last I checked," interjected Tarquin, "I took orders from a general, not a jumped-up tradesman." Henry clenched his fists and imagined how much delight he would find in pulverizing the lickspittle. "You'll be shot," he reminded himself as he studied the pudgy and entitled face staring indignantly at him. "But it might just be worth it." Tense quiet stretched between them, and it took a moment for Henry to realize the city's walls had fallen silent. "There it is. The quiet of impending victory is louder than any cannon," said the general. "The last of their powder is exhausted. Recall the men now, Tarquin, and have our cannon brought forward 200 yards. Pummel them, Colonel. I want those walls tender by dusk. Master Carpenter, to your duty. Give me back what we lost today." Most of the men in their red and brass coats had retreated in good order. Many of those they left behind were dead already, obliterated by hurtling metal. Some yet lay screaming. "This isn't a battlefield, it's an abattoir," thought Henry as he picked his way carefully through the aftermath. The city's cannonballs had left great gouges in the turf, which were decorated with broken bodies. Even though it had not rained yet this season, so much blood had been shed that sloshing, viscous mud was everywhere underfoot. It wouldn't do to slip and spill the contents of his carry sack into the mud. Henry's father had been a surgeon, and he tried to force Henry to inherit that trade, but he had abhorred the thought of slicing into skin from a young age. Instead, the yielding warmth of wood called to him. Despite choosing the path of a carpenter, he felt as though he had been fated to occupy a maze in which the only exits led to battlefields. Cabinetry, house building, toy carving, those should have been his trade. Instead, he was forced by circumstance and skill to be the conduit for an alternative to death. If you can turn wood, you can handle a soul, or so the saying went. And Henry was amongst the best when it came to wood. He found a likely candidate dragging his way towards a nearby corpse. The dead man had no head, and the legs of the living man ended in ragged curtains of skin. Henry knelt next to the man and laid his carry sack behind him. "Here we are, friend. It's all over now. I've got you, whispered Henry in what he hoped was a soothing tone. From the sack he withdrew a false soldier, a wooden facsimile of a person rather unfortunately constructed from bad lumber. Henry arranged it next to the wounded man, and then carefully took the nose from the false soldier. The nose was a small wooden spike carved to a point, which Henry gently placed in the middle of the wounded man's forehead. The man shuddered as his breath began to fail him, and his eyes fluttered for a moment. A few strong taps from Henry's mallet, and the man's misery was over. Working quickly, he removed the blooded spike and reinserted it into the wooden face. It took a moment in which Henry was always left to wonder if it had worked, or whether he'd just killed someone. Crude wooden eyes rolled to the forward position and stared up at him. The tongue clacked as the marionette tried to speak. That will take time, boyo. When you're ready to stand, take your uniform back and rejoin your regiment. Henry stood and walked away. Knowing there was no easing anyone into their next life with words, he found it best to give them a task. Back home, the dead were given a second chance if they could afford the services of a good carpenter. Henry had made quite a few marionettes for wealthy clients before the war. The gentry preferred snakewood or blackwood. It was a bugger to carve, but would last for centuries if treated correctly. It made him feel sick to have transferred that soldier into a body rush-carved from damp pine. But it was still something other than death, and he had his orders. Around him, his under-carpenters were dashing back and forth from the camp to the charnel fields. The barrage against the walls had resumed, and balls howled over their heads as they worked. The false soldiers were starting to sit up, to rob their own corpses. Some few had even begun their jerking return to service. Henry made 7 more trips, only stopping when all that remained were the truly dead men. The wall came down in the night, collapsing in a cloud of torchlit debris. Henry saw from his vantage point in the camp on the hill that there were already fires in the city from stray heated shot. Word came that the attack would commence at dawn, along with orders for his carpenters to work through the night. Bleary-eyed men and women joined him in their canvas-covered field workshop. They worked at their shave horses and carving benches all through the dark hours as the first rain of the season pattered gently above them. That rain transformed the military camp outside into a morass a man might drown in before he ever saw the enemy. They managed to make 100 more crude marionettes. Henry, raw from exhaustion, knew it would do little to balance the butcher's bill assaulting the breach would incur. Many of the carpenters went straight to their bedroll when the fife and drum called assembly, but Henry could not look away, and instead went to the vanguard picket to watch. The wooden soldiers, muskets slung over their shoulders, marched awkwardly and fearlessly out of the camp past him in a column, 5 men abreast. With a start, Henry recognised their commander was still human. Colonel Tarquin looked so pale as to be nearly see-through. Henry felt no glee to see the man marching to his death. Poor bastard, he thought, and then gave him a smart salute. Tarquin returned it, and as he marched past, spoke softly so only Henry could hear. You'll bring me back, won't you?
I must say, that's quite the fop voice you have, Ben.
I'm very good at a fop voice.
Before anything else, the fop voice, 11 out of 10. What is it about you, my friend, that means you look at the horrors of war and say, it's just not quite enough horror for me, really? And you come up with horrible resurrection Pinocchio. Where did it come from? What stemmed the idea?
I've got no idea. I actually don't have any idea. I wrote down about 6 other takes on this, and then I was sort of thinking about the definition of false and how it can be used to describe how something looks like something but isn't that.
Yeah.
Like I think it's in quite a lot of like flower names, for example. And then I thought, what if they're made of wood? It's difficult to say, really. because it sounds kind of silly when you just sort of spell out your thinking process, but it literally came from that. And then I just thought, what if they were made out of wood? And then went full Pinocchio with it.
I think I had to ask just because it's such an interesting concept that I wondered if there was a specific spark. If it's just that things can look like things and not be them. Men looking
and then
not quite like
the
men.
idea just tapped me on the shoulder. Really, it was just it was just
cool.
behind me. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was great. It was really that whole kind of through line of them being resurrected into these oversized Pinocchios, as a Nico put it, is it's interesting because you start it at the beginning with how he muses that the general doesn't really see the soldiers as real people, which is really good because it's kind of like an extension of that waste of war where everyone is expendable and it's just about attrition and it's just about getting that extra little bit of like you think about World War One when it was like they were just looking for like that extra couple of yards of land and that was the amount of blood that was spilled to gain that. And then, but this one it's taken a bit further because in those kind of conflicts the soldiers' freedom really is death, isn't it? They're free once they die, but they're not free in this one. And I also thought it was quite interesting at the end where you have like Tarquin's like, "Oh, you will bring me back, won't you?" And it's like, I mean, you'd want to come back to this, would you? Is it really like any kind of life? So it was really interesting, and it kind of captured that. The whole kind of atmosphere was kind of like with the foppish kind of officers that don't really know what they're doing. It was kind of like Abercrombie-esque, but it also had that kind of powder mage feel to it as well, with the kind of reality of war with like cannons and gunpowder and in that kind of fancy setting. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Abercrombie-esque got me excited. So that was
bloody shit.
I venerate Joe considerably. I feel like he's one of the best authors working at the moment. But
Me too.
yeah, I've always really loved his depictions of Major West in the first trilogy, and I think he's just got a handle on it. And he clearly grew up watching Sharp, I think. And
Right, yeah.
This has got a bit of a Napoleonic vibe to it for me, I think. Yeah. There is something as well potentially to the idea that the general maybe does know what he's doing to try and like bait the cannons out. I don't know. It's seen from the perspective of a carpenter, so all he sees is the loss of life.
Yeah.
So we don't really know what else is going on, what kind of formations that they're in. Yeah, he just has to deal with the loss of life, but obviously the general thinks that that's acceptable because he can put them back on wooden feet.
Yeah.
Oh, no, please go on.
Well, I was going to say it's kind of like that. It's more in the TV show of Game of Thrones with the Night King, where it's just like they just throw people to create more death because they know that like they're coming back one way or the other. So it's that way of just wearing someone down just over time because and it's with no sense of the saving lives or anything like that. It's just like we will wear you down one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're talking of putting people back on their feet. There was a really good bit, really nicely done part early on, where the carpenter was saying, "Well, they'll have no quality of life after the war." And obviously, my instinct was to think, "Oh, is he making prosthesis for people?" So when the twist came, I was like, "Oh shit!" So that use of language was really good, really evocative, and used the setting perfectly for an early term plot twist. So I'd be very pleased with that if I were you.
Thank you. Yeah, I got to the end of a first draft of this, and then I thought, oh, actually, maybe it would be more interesting to have the character be one of these guys that's been resurrected into like a bad body and having to reintegrate with society. It'd be more of like a veteran kind of story, like a coming home, the world's different, you're different, that kind of thing. But I don't know. I might go ahead and do that at some other point because I feel like Tarquin would be a really good character to see as a like a shit marionette.
Like
Yeah,
struggling at a fancy feast where he
yeah,
can't quite use the right fork and stuff. Yeah,
yeah. And he's
I'd
having to
read the
like
fuck out of that.
yeah, exactly. He's having to like buy expensive lacquers to try and seal the shit wood that he was created in and all that kind of stuff. I think it could be a whole that could be a real that I feel like that guy feels like he could be a main character of something.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, but yeah, thanks for listening, guys, and thanks for the feedback. Anything you'd change? Anything you'd knock about? Maybe restructure, David.
No, not really. I think the way I always kind of approach feedback, it's more like about the feel of things because I think there can be a trap sometimes where you go, well, I might do this, but then that's not your voice or anything. You know what I mean. So I'm always kind of like I'm always kind of like I try to. I mean, I think this might be the editor side in me as well because I do edit. So it's like I kind of try to always look at someone's voice and style and kind of like kind of just look at it more of like a structurally kind of thing or just the language and everything like that. But I thought it worked really really well for me. I really liked it. The atmosphere was great. Um, I mean, there is that temptation of kind of if you wanted to go down the route of Tarquin as the marionette of mainly maybe adding a little stinger to the end of it where like he says, well, you will bring me back, won't you? And then having just like the next day kind of him kind of being put into his body and saying, I kept my promise or something like that. I hope you're happy or whatever, just to kind of just give that if you wanted to kind of give if you were looking to take him into different directions, so it might be a nice little sting at the end of the
Oh
story.
yeah,
But
I get it.
that's
So
yeah.
similarly to you, I was 9 shy of the max, so I unfortunately had no more words. But yeah, I get it. I think that's a good point. There was originally there was a bit of a longer conversation between them at that point, and but I felt like I had to distill it down into the core of it, which is that he just didn't want to die there. Like
Yeah.
he wanted to have something else afterwards.
That's right, Ben.
Yeah.
9 words. Yes, mate. I will definitely resurrect you tomorrow morning. There you go.
Did you count
Easy.
resurrect as 2 words then?
Maybe.
I just think
I'm not
it'd be
putting
quite
words in.
interesting. It'd be quite interesting if like Tarquin came back and his immediate reaction is just to start screaming or something that he just
Yeah,
completely regrets it. That he's
but like
trapped in
through
this
like a
wooden
wooden
body.
throat, like a clacking wooden tongue in a throat that can't scream.
There's
Yeah,
also
yeah, yeah, yeah,
there's
yeah,
definitely something in the him being like, oh, it's only wood at the beginning, and then for him to be so
Yeah,
horrified by the state of the wood. That's it's interesting because I did at the beginning. I had a note that said, as much as I like the Fop voice, do we need this character? And then
yeah,
for him to be the thing at the end, I was like, oh yeah, we definitely needed him. That was an excellent payoff. So that would have been my only structural note, but it was all for a reason. So,
yeah. I tried. I,
so
I
no
tried to.
changes.
I tried to keep it for a reason.
Yeah, I don't. That's why I
Um,
wrote it down. I'm rubbish at things being there for a reason. I just like words.
yeah, you could have like them have like tattoos that are carvings and things like that. It could be really quite interesting. I think as a world building concept. Along,
Mm.
you'd have to do it alongside something else. As you were saying, it sounds quite powder mage, doesn't it? I think you'd
Mm.
have to go down that route. Anyway, enough workshopping that. Thank you very much for that feedback. It was very good. Um, 3 very different stories.
Oh yes.
3 very different stories. Always good. Always good. So, David, I was just wondering if you could tell our audience a little bit about your books and potentially where they can buy them.
Yeah, so I have two kind of series at the moment. One is now self-published. It was with a publisher, but the rights reverted back to me. That's my epic fantasy series. It's called Empire of Ruin. Books. It's 4 book series. It is basically the best way to describe it is Wheel of Time meets The Witcher with lesbians is what I have found out is the best way to describe this book, this series.
That is
Um,
pretty brilliant. I saw one of the quotes from an Amazon reviewer was Lord of the Rings meets Witcher politics with lesbians. So
yes, that
that seems to be the general consensus. So I think you've done well there.
yeah, yeah. It's one of those that it took me a while to kind of think of like how do I distill this down to, and that's where I got it from. It was from that review. I was like, yeah, that's pretty much perfect. So yeah, so like so there's 4 books. The first one was the first one that I ever wrote, and the second, third, and fourth books were all nominated for Best Fantasy Novel at the British Fantasy Awards. So when I got the rights back, I did the thing that you're always told not to do, and I went back and rewrote the first book and expanded it a little bit and tidied it up and just did a few things that in the years between writing it and getting the rights back, I was kind of like, I wish that I'd done this. I wish that I'd done that. So I did that and I re-released them all in February this year with lovely new covers, and you can get those on Amazon. You can get them on my website as well, which is davidgreenwriter.com. And I have another series which is with a publisher, which is an urban fantasy series called Hell in Haven. And this is basically Supernatural meets the Dresden Files. It's like kind of really, really kind of fast paced. It's pretty snarky as well. It's very much about kind of found family as well as a big thing in it. It's kind of a jab at toxic masculinity. It's kind of puncturing that kind of trope of noirish kind of stuff where where they're quite misogynistic, and it's kind of taking a look at that and looking at the tropes and everything. But basically, the setup of this is that the main character, Nick Colleran, is a PI, and he dies in the first line of the first book. Um, and he's an atheist, as he is dying, his body leaves his spirit leaves his body and starts going up to heaven. And he's like, "Well, fuck me, I was wrong about everything." And and as that is happening, he gets resuscitated and pulled back into his body. And when he's released from hospital and everything like that, from his surgeries and everything, he realizes that not only is heaven real, but hell is also real, and everyone on Earth is living in hell. It's literally hell on Earth. So there's like demons and ghosts and Nephilim and all this kind of stuff that are there. So he decides that he wants to figure out why this is the case, and also now he knows that heaven is real. He's like, I would like to go to heaven once I die. So he's trying to be a good person whilst now navigating this. So it's quite fun, and it's the one that I started writing it as like a break in between my epic fantasy books. It was like kind of like my little reward for finishing an epic fantasy book.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah.
But I like it, and then I have a couple of other things that I've so you can get those on Amazon as well, and my website, and I have a cozy fantasy on submission with my agent at the moment, which is currently called Maps Magic no, what's it called? Magic Maps and Mischief. It is about it's a spin-off from my epic fantasy books, and it's set a few hundred years before with one of the characters in it, and it's in a different part of the world. And he's an elderly autistic map maker. He's not very very good at magic, but he has a few certain tricks, and he gets asked early on what his heart's desire is from someone who he is rescuing or letting go, should we say, which puts him in a lot of trouble. And so he goes on this quest to discover what his heart's desire is, and he creates a magical ink that he can put onto a parchment, which will show anyone a map to their heart's desire. But two things happen. One is that so two things happen. One thing is that it doesn't seem to work for him, and the second thing is that he cannot conceive that some people's heart's desires would not be very good.
Very good.
Yes, so he is trying to kind of the autistic sense of injustice becomes very, very strong in him, and he kind of tries to sort out the situation. So there's that one that's on submission, and I'm just about to finish the Fantasy World's first therapist for D&D characters, basically, which is the premise for that one.
Oh, that's such an exciting body of work. That's really cool.
Very cool.
Could you, just before we close out this episode and people can join us next week, do you have insight into what structurally makes a cozy fantasy a cozy fantasy? Because I heard the term a lot at Fantasycon last year, and I couldn't tell whether it was just like a vibe or whether there was something structural or plot wise that makes something cozy.
Yeah, I think it's something that's kind of as a term, it's something that's just become quite new, and people are still trying to figure it out. But also on the same, on the other hand, should I say, is that it has been around for quite a long time. It's something that's come out of Eastern literature, like particularly in Japan, and they were kind of writing it like Howl's Moving Castle and Kiki's Delivery Service I would say were cozy, and other things like that as well. But now it's become like a thing. It's one of those things that, particularly in the traditional publishing world, that people are still trying to figure out what it is. They know it when they see it, and it's generally when something has been self-published and it's done really, really well, and they're like, "We're going to buy it because this is what cozy fantasy is." People like this,
Fair enough.
but then they're not really sure what it is, and I think there's a tendency for a lot of intrades, like it needs to have a lot of romance, which I would say it doesn't. For me, the kind of thing with it is that a lot of it is to do with found family. Found family is a huge trope in cozy, and I think also identity is also a very, very important theme in cozy as well. I think it's a safe space for underrepresented writers of underrepresented backgrounds to write about their identities in a safe space, and for people to read that as well. And I sometimes see this kind of thing where it's like kind of it's kind of a flippant, or it's dismissive, where they say, well, it's low stakes, they have to have low stakes, and there's or no stakes in some cases. And I would push back on that a little bit as well, because what I would say is it's not no stakes, but it's personal stakes. So you could be in this like fantasy world, like I've set mine in an epic fantasy world, but it's telling a story that's very, very personal. And in that world, there might be something that's going on in the next city, or the next other characters in that city, which is like earth shattering and earth changing and earth shaking and all this kind of stuff. But the story that we're telling in the cozy fantasy isn't going to matter to those people. Whatever that story is, it's not really going to affect people in the next street over. It's not going to really affect anyone apart from the people inside the story. But those people that are in the story, those stakes will mean the entire world to them.
What a solid description that was. Really
that's how I would that's how I would kind of look at it and go, the stakes need to be important more than anything to that character you're telling the story about, but it doesn't need to matter to anyone else outside of the story. Whereas when you think of something like The Wheel of Time, or Lord of the Rings, anything, big epic fantasy, what's happening in that story is important to everyone. It's going to have ramifications everywhere, right? So that's the way I would kind of look at it.
I was going to say you made it sound lovely, but in fact you made it sound cozy. That feels like the more proper thing to say. Before we allow you to actually take an in-breath and then start torturing you with questions, David, where can people find you online if they want to hear more of your musings and know when they can get your lovely book?
Well, my website is davidgreenwriter.com, and that has a lot of my stuff on there. I'm mostly active on Blue Sky these days, so I am at David Green Writer, which I am also the same on Instagram. And I also have a Facebook group that people are free to come and join if they like. It's called David Green's Readerverse of Madness. For some reason, I think I must have been really excited about the Doctor Strange film a few years ago.
Well, David,
yeah,
your time has been most valuable, but we're not going to let you have any more yet. The rest of you, however, can come back in a week and hear what we managed to pick out of David Green's brain. Say goodbye, David.
Goodbye, and thank you for having me.
Oh, don't thank us yet. Oh, I think I've said that before.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we?
For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Burn. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La, How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?